Assalamu alaikum. Mr. Moderator, our distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, our friends and our enemies.
We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap. Okay, so that's the message. It doesn't mean to say that there's nothing Africans can do. Of course there is. Okay, but this is the opposition that they're fighting. This is what it's about. Because if Africa does do something different, I assure you living standards of all those in Europe and North America and Asia is going to fall. Okay? And that is a big price to pay. I assure you that the West is not going to allow that without a big fight. Okay, so this is what it's fundamentally about. What I want to show you is how these structures are operating. It's just 20 minutes, so we can't do very much, but just to give you a little bit of an idea. And why I keep the ideology part there is because we are part of the producers of ideology. At universities and academic institutions, we are complicit in this whole enterprise. Okay, so the job of many Western academics is to convince Africans they have to keep doing what they're doing. Okay, and to show them it's your fault that you're poor. It's not our fault. It's your fault that you're poor. You know, so this is what we do in academic institutions.
And your first mistake was assuming that these people were well-intentioned when they are the spawn of Satan.
Salam wa salatu wa salam Rasulullah wa ba'd. Name of Allah, and may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon His Prophet as to what follows. Family, friends, foes, homies, and haters, welcome back to another episode of The Features. I greet you all in love and serenity with no hatred in my heart. And I greet you in peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and the blessings of Allah be upon all of you. So before we continue, please hit the like button, please hit the share button, please hit the subscribe button, and please support me on Patreon. As you know, we have gathered and gained a lot of haters up in here already, all right? A lot of big time haters, but that's the price for telling the truth. So, to backtrack from our last episode, to just kind of do a quick review, we went into how the brother Daniel Hakikachu has very strong alt-right affinities, and that is his actual political philosophy. And we also went into briefly how this league of Dawah dope dealers, these Rabbit Ruwaybada, and how their Dawah is just full of just contradictions, and it's old and tired, and it doesn't help anybody. This 15, 20-year-old Dawah that they're doing on these refutations, and now they have themselves in a big problem, because if you're going to keep harping on this liberalism, LGBTQ, Omar Suleiman stuff, right? If you're going to keep doing that, this left-based, refuting that left-based political view, then how can you do that and be silent about the alt-right political view of Daniel Hakikachu, having him all over your platforms, right, and still expect to keep your integrity intact? How does that work? And what planet does that work, right? So we dealt with that. And this episode here, what we want to get into is a quirk in human psychology. Now, this quirk, right, is basically if you express something verbally, if you express it out loud, whether in speaking it or writing it or whatever it is, any human being who does that, if they express their opinions, their beliefs verbally, it is extremely difficult once they've actually expressed it to come back from that belief, because they've already taken that position. So when you've taken a position on a thing, it is very difficult, right, in human psychology to return from that position. You have, in the human brain, you have to hold that position, right? So what do a lot of these experts in fields that deal with people en masse, what do they do, right? For example, in the political field, in the marketing field, in the sales field, in the media field, right? If they know that they're going to say something that's going to cause an objection, right? Meaning that the person will express their objection verbally, they do something which is called objection blocking. You see this all the time in, for example, politics, especially politics, right? For example, Joe Biden, he has a horrific record when it comes to race. Horrific. You understand? So, for example, Joe Biden, when segregation was just finished, he himself tried to introduce bills to prevent buses from going into black neighborhoods and picking up black children to go into the better financed, better equipped white schools. He actually fought against this. He also was integral for the bill that incarcerated more black men in human history, which is the 3 strikes law, right? He was an integral part of that bill. So he knows this. So what he does now, before people verbally express their disdain for his dismal record when it comes to race, he tackles that objection first. You understand what I'm saying? So he says, for example, you know, we've made some mistakes in the past with, you know, the 3 strikes law, but we promise to deal with it now. Before you say anything, he's going to deal with that first. This is called objection blocking. You understand? You know, just because I have that African American swinging from my tree, and I have that cross burning in front of that African American's house, and I'm wearing this white sheet and white hood, that doesn't make me a white supremacist. Get it? That's how it works, right? And most people, right, especially if the person comes off as educated or trustworthy, they'll be like, yeah, sounds about right. They forget of all the works that they did, right? Or they forget about the actions, but they just go based upon what they say, right? So this tactic is called objection blocking. What does it have to do with anything? Well, we're going to get to that, right? But before we do, we're going to read from an article that I posted in the last video. We're going to read something from there, and then we're going to build up from there. Now, remember in our last video, we briefly touched up on this article that Daniel wrote. And at the end of the article, Daniel concludes, and a note to white nationalists. If you're a white nationalist reading this, let me have the privilege of inviting you to Islam. If you are a non-Muslim reading this, white nationalist or not, we invite you to the path of God, path of righteousness, path of sincerity, love, and devotion to the Creator, God Almighty. Now, I think, or I know actually, most black people, they won't have a problem of anybody making dawah to white supremacists, white nationalists, as long as they don't, you know, do something crazy. Like, for example, they don't express like excuses for Donald Trump's policies, for example, like the Muslim ban. Like, we can't imagine, for example, the brother Daniel Hakikachu making excuses for the Muslim ban, right? Right? How to fight Muslim bans without liberalism. We need to have a deeper conversation about how we as Muslims understand modern concepts, structures, and institutions in light of religious principles. Here is a simple example. If we look at the scholar tradition, banning non-Muslims from entering Mecca and Medina is well established, and some classical scholars even extended that restriction to the entirety of the Arabian Peninsula. Given this part of our tradition, on what basis can we object to a country that decides to ban Muslims from entering, or a country that bans Muslims from entering particular cities? This is an important question, and I'm not asking for merely rhetoric, a rhetorical effect. I was trying to make this point earlier with the issue of hijab, but the border control is an even more straightforward case. In this case, appealing to principles of freedom of religion and the liberal maxims clearly won't cut mustard. If we insist on resorting to liberalism to defend Muslims in these countries, then we should expect liberalism to be used to attack us in return. Why should a predominantly non-Muslim secular nation allow Muslim immigration, but Muslims won't allow non-Muslims to enter these cities? By reflexively appealing to liberal sensibilities to defend Muslims in the West, and we are essentially writing checks we can't cash. You can read this entire article. It's not very long, but it's clear here that he's siding with the alt-right. He's basically saying, since we do it in Muslim countries, they should be allowed to ban Muslims from entering non-Muslim countries. Furthermore, the whole premise of Daniel's argument, with all due respect to the brother, is very flimsy. Ain't nobody ever said non-Muslims are not allowed in Muslim countries, ever. And if you're talking about the Haramain, the two sanctuaries, Mecca and Medina, even there, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu was assassinated by Abu Lu'la, this Christian non-Muslim who in Medina. So there were always historically non-Muslims in the Haramain. So if you're talking about the ruling, nobody exiled non-Muslims from Muslim countries ever in history of Islam, right? You're talking about two sanctuaries of worship, sort of like the Vatican. If you're comparing it to the Vatican, that's a different story. But he wasn't doing that. He was saying Muslim country, non-Muslim country. He took such a hardline position with the alt-right that he didn't even bother taking an Islamic position. But, it could be a mistake. But as long as he doesn't, outright defend the person who, is promoting the Muslim ban, we could probably excuse the brother, because he would never even think of defending the perpetrator, this anti-Islamic president, right? Right? The privilege of fear in the age of Trump. I'm getting increasingly disturbed and upset by the reaction I'm seeing from some of the American Muslim community regarding Trump. There is a frenzy and hysteria gripping so many, and I understand we should be sympathetic to fears and provide comfort, but things are getting really out of hand. My question is, where have we been for the past 8 years? Do you want to talk about privilege? Let's talk about privilege. If you're a Muslim during the Obama administration, without a real sense of fear and paranoia and concern about yourself and your family, and you must have been highly privileged compared to the rest of us. If you have been passing your days for the past 8 years without a real sense that the federal government could target you at any time and sink you and your family into a living nightmare, and only now that there's a President-elect Trump, do you feel anxiety, then I'm sorry to say, either you're naive or you're highly privileged. And I'm not using the word privilege here, and again, here he goes, in a rhetorical sense, right? Many in our community benefited greatly from the Obama administration. Many of them were in the Obama administration and were in the good graces of the federal authority. So it's not surprised that those who profited from partisan politics for 8 years are upset and disappointed that the party has been cut short. But for the rest of us, nothing has changed. I understand people have short memories, But are Muslims not aware that in 8 years under Obama's directive, the crisis in the Middle East has gotten far worse than under Bush? Are we not aware that in the 8 years under Obama's directive, Muslim civil liberties have been greatly eroded compared to the Bush years? These are not my opinions. These are facts. These are facts as determined by independent, nonpartisan analysts. Let's take off the rose-tinted glasses. Frustratingly, Muslims insist on operating under a mistaken presumption that one party is categorically more evil or more malicious, more anti-Muslim than the other. I'm sorry, but I just can't take seriously any discussion or reaction premised on this gravely mistaken misunderstanding of the way the country's government works and has worked right before our eyes. Do you know what it feels like that the federal agencies are constantly watching you and your family? Do you know what it feels like to go through the airport and get extra scrutinized and worry that you might not even be able to board the plane because you've been on a no-fly list that Obama expanded oh, more than 10 times its size during his tenure? Do you know what it feels like to stay in your house with your family nervously after another terrorist attack or entrapment plot, probably because you're worried about backlash if you stepped outside because you're worried about Obama's DHS and FBI agents could stop by at any time for a chat? Have you not been questioned by the FBI where you're left wondering, how did they know I'm Muslim? How do they know where I live? Have you ever had family members questioned by the FBI? Many Muslims experience all these things, much more during the Obama's tenure because Obama's policies, others were not so burdened. Okay, well, you can read the rest of it. It's not very long again. So this is a typical Trump rant. Okay, sorry to say it like that. But, you know, all the problems with the Trump administration, they instantly go to Obama. Oh, Obama did it first and whatnot. And this is actually a type of logical fallacy. It's called tu quoque, an appeal to hypocrisy. So basically what they're saying is for example, if I say, you shouldn't smoke, right? And you turn to me and say, well, you smoke too. It doesn't stop the fact that you shouldn't smoke. You understand? Right? So it's that type of thing. Right. Furthermore, the left-right paradigm, they both carry out elite, orders anyways, for corporations, like white supremacists. So they're both carrying out the bidding of their paymasters. So you should have a firm position against both of them. But rather, he's defending Trump and, going after Obama. But, we can't, I mean, this might be a mistake, but obviously we can't expect him to do the same thing, for example, the border wall, right? Right? Obama's brutal deportation regime. Okay, so another op-ed he wrote, another typical tu quoque article where, again, because Trump's deportation and border wall and all this kind of stuff is getting all of this attention, he says, well, Obama did it, right? So it's another short article, but here's the interesting about this thing. He makes a link to The Intercept. They talk about Barack Obama's immigration record and all these people who are in prison under Obama's immigration record and whatnot. But again, it's not about Obama. Obama's not president today. It's Donald Trump who's a president today. So why are you focusing on the president who's already out, right? Unless you have clear alt-right leanings.
In immigration news, attorneys with the American Civil Liberties Union working to identify families that were separated at the U.S.-Mexico border say they have not been able to find the parents of 545 children in U.S. custody, as most of those parents have already been deported to Central America. NBC News reports the ACLU and other legal groups were appointed to help reunite children taken from their parents under a Trump administration 2017 zero-tolerance pilot program, which separated over 1,000 families. Only about half of them have been reunited. A number of the children, the government does not know their whereabouts either.
And that's the real issue at hand, dealing with the over 500 children that have been separated from their parents under the Trump administration. And as I said before, it doesn't make a difference if it's left or right. It's part of the same white supremacist system. You should be fighting both sides, not just taking one side over the other, you know. And I know it's not really looking good, but we hope at least he won't be retweeting the Orange and Chiefs, one of his tweets, right? And he retweeted one of his tweets. Look at this. Maybe the smartest comment, blah, 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 right? I will be leaving the Walter Reed Center today, 6:30, feeling good. Don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life. Okay, all right. He retweeted, let's say, okay, he retweeted a retweet of Donald Trump. He didn't actually retweet Donald Trump. He retweeted a retweet of Donald Trump. Okay? But bare minimum, he won't make any outrageous, outlandish statements about anything that will affect the black community directly, right? Right? The Nazis and racist Trump supporters who protested the lockdown by going to the beach are endangering lives because someone might catch the flu. But the brave freedom fighters burning a city to the ground are heroes we must support. If you disagree, you hate black people. This right here was an egregious dig at black people. 100%. First of all, Brother Danny Hakikuchu, why are these black people in the streets to begin with? Is it for COVID, or is it for the many years long of police brutality that the black community has been facing? Did they go on the street because of the virus, or did they go on the street because they witnessed 8 minutes and 40 odd seconds of a man's life being choked out of him on video? What did they go to the streets for? Black people are dying by the hands of cops all the time. Since the George Floyd protest, 8 black people have been strung up on trees and lynched, and I think 2 or 3 of them were ruled as suicides. Suicides, okay? Meanwhile, these Trump supporters are protesting these, okay? You need to tell me how many people do you know, black people do you know, that died at the hands of police brutality, and how many people in history ever died from wearing one of these? And then you can compare the two. There's a world of difference going on here. A world of difference. One of them is a public health thing, and another one is centuries long of murdering black people by the hands of authorities. You don't see the difference? And the funny thing is, you do see the difference, because when Hamza Yusuf said the things that he said about the Syrians, it was you who pointed that out to the world. Oh, look at Hamza Yusuf, you know, look what he's saying about the Syrians. But yet you do the same thing that Hamza Yusuf did against the Syrians. You do the same thing against black people. The same thing. What's the difference? You ain't got nothing to say about those race police. Nothing to say in favor of the oppressed. Nothing at all. But you can actually criticize the oppressed, favor the oppressors, and then compare getting your life snuffed out by cops to this. because this is how much black life is worth to you. This. If it's Syrians, yes, of course, you know, we have to defend the Syrians. But black life, they're only Negroes. But anyway, let's say, for example, that this was like, you know, a slip of the fingers, per se. Slip of the thumbs by the brother Daniel. Okay? And notice how he used the objection blocking in that tweet as well, right? But we couldn't imagine him going directly after one of these people who was snuffed out by cops, right? For example, let's say Breonna Taylor. You know, Breonna Taylor, again, I did a detailed video about Breonna Taylor's situation. And I said that the actual shooting itself was not race-based, but the events leading up to it and events leading after it, the events after the shooting was absolutely race-based. Absolutely. And I went into detail about it, right? And we can't imagine now anybody blaming this innocent black woman for her death, right? Because, for example, let's say her boyfriend now, as these race baiters from the alt-right, they always want to say that Breonna Taylor's boyfriend was a drug dealer, which he is not, and he has no criminal record. But let's say, for example, that he was, in fact, a drug dealer, and like these race soldiers say, oh, you know, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend was a drug dealer, therefore she deserved to get killed because of her boyfriend. What is the message that you're sending? Okay? What is the message that you're sending if you say something like this, right? So the message is that if you have any type of criminal record, that the police will be justified in snuffing your life out for having that criminal record. And we know, as I did a video before about mass incarceration and the war on drugs, how these race soldiers used to plant crack on black people en masse, and not just black people, Hispanics, you know, the brown people, Latinos and whatnot, en masse in order to set them up for crimes they weren't committing. And plus you add the 3 strikes law, then you have all these black and brown people being arrested for life for minor crimes. So the message that you're sending is that if, you know, you are with a drug dealer or a criminal, then your life has no value. And this is not even what Islam says. Islam doesn't even say that. Right? Not to mention that he himself legally registered that handgun in his name. So if he legally registered that handgun in his name, he wasn't a criminal. Because you can't have a criminal record and have a legally registered handgun. But we can't imagine, for example, a brother like Daniel Hakikachu involving himself in this type of race baiting rhetoric, you know, on his Twitter, right? Right? Anyone who does not cry and wail for Breonna is a white supremacist. Anyone who does not shake with anger for Breonna, screaming up at the sky justice, is a white supremacist. I guess her boyfriend is also a white supremacist. Stop being played. So I want you guys to think about this for a second. Okay. This woman, she died innocently. And Daniel Hakikachu is a Muslim. He didn't have to say anything, actually. He could have just stayed quiet. But he found it in his heart not to just get up, not to just go on his device, not to just, you know, type something or anything. No, he had to use certain language and adjectives to express his disdain and his distaste for people who are asking for justice for an innocent black woman getting killed. He didn't have to do that, but he chose to use this language. Whoever does not cry and wail for Breonna Taylor is a white supremacist. And notice again, he's using this objection blocking technique because he understands by using this language, people will object, obviously, because this woman is dead. Why are you using this language? Why? You don't have to say anything. You could have just been quiet. A lot of Muslims are being quiet about this. Why are you interjecting yourself into this situation using that language? So just because I pander to white supremacists and I have alt-right political values and I make excuses for the Muslim ban and I say the Trump administration immigration policy isn't as bad as Obama's, and I outright defend our orange and chief Donald Trump, and I trivialize black suffering under police brutality because everybody knows that these face masks are the real grand evil plot to take over the world. And I also say that those protesters aren't protesters, rather they're violent rioters, not to be confused with the peaceful protesters in Syria. And I found the time and energy to express my displeasure with seeking justice for Breonna Taylor. That does not mean that I am a white supremacist. Well, he says he's not a white supremacist. I guess we should believe in him, right? Husna done. You know, Muslim akhu Muslim. We have to, you know, have husna done for the Muslims, right? Sometimes those Gulf countries, they don't pay their workers, but it's not because they don't consider them Muslim brothers. They consider them their Muslim brothers. They're just ripping them off, you know. Have husna done, you know. Well, y'all are suckers, man. Y'all believe anything, man. Instead of looking at their people's actions, anything that anybody tells you, believe, man. And here's the problem. How are these Rabbit or Wabada going to reconcile with this now? How are they going to package this? You know? Now you remember when I said, you know, that we should call the Nation of Islam to Islam and all the backlash I got for that. Just for that. What are you going to say about this now? I'm just saying. But anyways, like I said, that's not even the worst of it. And it's not in refutation of Daniel King. These are his words. This is what he believes. He believes this stuff. So anyways, please like, subscribe, share, hit me up on Patreon. I came to you in peace and love, serenity. I leave you in peace and love, serenity. Subhanakallah bihamdik wa shara la ilaha illa ant wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and peace and blessings of Allah be upon all of you.
I want every